Is there a God? Are we all designed, created and governed by a supremely perfect being, or are we all ultimately alone in this infinitely magnificent universe? It's time to find out. Well, I mean, it's time to discuss it for a while without really coming to any conclusions. Cheers. Georgetown. The thing is, and I hope I made this point in my previous philosophy snacks video, Cogito Ergo Sum, right here, that we don't really know very much of anything, in any real sense. We don't know anything much. We don't even properly know that our own mothers exist, okay? So let's take this whole thing with a pinch of salt. The truth is, nobody actually knows, in the serious sense of the word, whether God exists, any more than they know that the ground will still be there to support them when they get out of bed every morning. Of course, while there are very few things we actually know, there are an awful lot of things that we think we know, that we make assumptions about for practical purposes, or that we have strong suspicions about based on the evidence, and God is one of those things. In this video, I just want to talk about a few of the arguments for the existence of God, and then conclude that ultimately it doesn't really matter what any of us as individuals believe. It's the way that we apply those beliefs, the way that we behave in reaction to them, that really matters. So why does anyone believe in God? Well, I mean, a lot of people struggle to understand the world, and it's not surprising. It's incredibly complicated, right? There's an awful lot of stuff going on, some of it is pretty fantastic. And it's a natural reaction to assume that somebody's taking care of it, that there's an intelligence greater than our own which knows what that's going on. That's ultimately the long and short of a couple of arguments for the existence of God. The argument from design goes like this: look at all this incredible stuff. It couldn't have happened by accident. It takes a look at amazingly complicated natural things like the human eye and says, well look, that's so perfectly suited to its task, it couldn't possibly have just come about by accident. Someone really thought that through, say the pro-God types. And for many millennia, that was seriously the best answer that anyone could come up with. It wasn't until the 19th century with Charles Darwin and lots of scientific research into the theory of evolution that an alternative, a really viable alternative, came into play. And that theory explains the incredible complexity and synchronicity of the natural world in such an elegant way that a lot of people have taken it as disproof of the existence of God. But in fact, it's no such thing. It's not really even evidence against God. That's the really crazy thing. All it is a very rigorously thought through scientific explanation of a bunch of phenomena. Because here's the really funny thing about God and believing in God. It's sort of undisprovable. Bertrand Russell, one of my favourite 20th century British philosophers, described believing in God as similar to believing that there is a teapot orbiting the sun, somewhere between the Earth and Mars, and it's so small you can't even see it through a telescope, but it's there, I promise, it just is. Now, if I asked you to disprove that that teapot existed, you'd really struggle. I say it's there, you say it isn't, we're at a stalemate. It's ludicrous for me to ask you to disprove the existence of something. And this is a massively misunderstood area of the discussion about God. The burden of proof in any argument lies with the party who claims the existence of something, who positively invokes an idea. It's impossible to argue against the existence of something, especially something you can't see. The best you can do is say, well, I haven't found a reason to believe in it yet. There's this thing about swans. If you see 1,000,000 white swans, you still haven't proven that all swans are white. All you need is to see one black swan. And that's what's going on here. So lots of theists, believers in God, have tried to come up with ways of showing us that black swan. And the argument from design is one. Another is the cosmological argument, which states there is stuff, therefore it came from somewhere. We see and experience a lot of stuff around us. We exist, as I explained in my previous philosophy snacks video, so it must have all come from something. We can't have just become. So the cosmological argument states that by definition there must be an absolute and final cause of everything in the universe. It's the only coherent way to understand where it all began. Another animal-based analogy, if you will, imagine that the Earth is sitting on the back of a giant turtle, okay, not just spinning through the endless void of space, but resting on the back of a giant turtle. Now that turtle needs somewhere to stand as well, so imagine it's standing on the back of an even bigger turtle, and then that turtle on another turtle, and so on and so forth. You may ask, what's the last turtle standing on? And I will say to you, no, it's turtles all the way down. That's the sort of nonsense that the cosmological argument attempts to answer. And it's even a little stronger than the argument from design, because as far as I'm aware, the scientific community has yet to come up with a complete and viable alternative theory for the origin of the universe. There are a lot of ideas being kicked around, but of course it's very, very complicated. It involves time and matter and energy and all sorts of complicated things that we don't know much about. As yet, no definitive answer as far as I'm aware. But again, it's not the responsibility of the scientific community to disprove the existence of God. It's the responsibility of the God community to prove the existence of God if they so wish. So the cosmological argument fragment is another insubstantiated, incomplete theory. And the truth is that's what we're working with on a lot of things a lot of the time. While we don't literally know very much of anything, for practical purposes we work every day with our best guesses based on the evidence in front of us. We make decisions like whether or not it's safe to cross the road based on the evidence of our eyes and ears, but we don't know that we're not in some sort of virtual reality program and that we're looking at an empty road, but in fact there's a massive truck coming towards us that we can't see or hear because we've got earplugs in and who knows? Nobody, that's right. We make guesses based on what we think is most likely to be the case. And it's the same with God. The truth is, for all that philosophical discussion, a lot of people believe in God just because they want to. They don't want to be ultimately responsible for their own existence. They don't want the buck to stop with them. A lot of people believe in God because they feel like they've had personal experience of God's power. They've spoken to God or seen God's work firsthand. And it's not really the place of anybody to argue against that. If someone receives and holds on to a piece of evidence that is relevant to them, they're very welcome so to do. Equally, if someone wants to examine rigorously collected scientific empirical evidence and form an alternative worldview, that's up to them too. My point is, no one actually knows whether God exists or not. It doesn't really make sense to ask the question. And yet, a lot of people get very antagonistic about it. And that's the bit that makes absolutely no sense to me. Evangelism, dogma, trying to get people to change their minds. Quite apart from the fact that I'm sure any conception of God would be happy for you to believe whatever you want to believe as long as you're nice about it, it doesn't make any sense to argue with people about this stuff, especially not to the death. I don't know whether God exists, and neither do you. Let's just be nice and calm and relaxed about it, and when we can't agree, we'll just talk about like music or art or something instead. Good. Nothing wrong with that.
I am Georgetown.
Thanks very much for watching. Next time on Philosophy Snacks, I'm going to go right back to the beginning. I'm going to talk about what philosophy is, because I realised I didn't already do that. So tune in again next time, and subscribe to my channel if you like this video. There'll be more on the way. All the best, everybody. Bye-bye.